I never thought the home I built with love would one day become the stage for truth. Life has a quiet way of preparing us for storms. You never hear the thunder until it's right above you. That villa was my dream. When I first saw it, the walls were bare. The paint still smelled new, but I could already see the memories waiting to be made. I imagined laughter echoing through the halls, the smell of my husband's favorite coffee in the morning, the two of us sitting on the balcony as the sun slipped behind the trees. Back then, I believed love could fix anything. He was my world, my first thought every morning, and my last prayer every night. I bought that villa, not for luxury, but for us. It was meant to be the place where our love would grow old gracefully, just like the two of us. The first few months were everything I dreamed of. We cooked together, planted roses in the garden, and talked for hours about our future. He'd laugh and call me his anchor, and I believed him. But love, real love, is not tested by the good days. It's tested by the silences that no one talks about. Slowly, the laughter faded into short smiles. The coffee turned cold before we finished it. He began spending longer hours away, saying work had become demanding. I believed him, because trust was the only thing I had ever known how to give. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and see the empty side of the bed. The moonlight would fall across his pillow, untouched and cold. I'd tell myself he was just busy, that love doesn't always need words. But deep down, a quiet ache began to grow. I remember one evening, I made his favorite soup, hoping we'd sit together like we used to. But when he came home, he smiled faintly, said he wasn't hungry, and disappeared into the study. I stood by the table for a long time, listening to the ticking of the clock, feeling time stretch between us like a wall I couldn't climb. That days turned into weeks, and that house, the one I built with love, began to feel larger, emptier. Every sound echoed, every silence felt louder. Still, I told myself it was just a phase. Love has seasons, doesn't it? I thought maybe ours was simply changing. So I waited, patiently, faithfully, like the woman I was raised to be. Then came that evening. The sky was the color of fading gold, and the wind carried the smell of rain. I was arranging the flowers he'd once loved when the phone rang. A familiar name flashed across the screen, one I didn't expect. My hand trembled as I answered, and in that moment, I didn't know it yet, but the truth had just dialed my number. Until one evening, a call changed everything. People say when love starts to fade, you can feel it before you can see it. I didn't believe that, not until I lived it. After that phone call, something in me began to shift. No words had been spoken, no accusations made, yet I felt an invisible distance growing between us. He started coming home later than usual. At first, he said the meetings were running long, then that there were new clients, new deadlines. I nodded and smiled, the way a trusting wife does. But love has a rhythm, and I could feel ours losing its beat. He'd walk through the door smelling of a perfume I didn't wear. His tie would be loosened, his eyes tired, not from work, but from pretending. Still, I said nothing, because you don't fight the person you love, you question yourself instead. Maybe I was being too sensitive, maybe I wasn't enough anymore, maybe I was just imagining things because the silence was too loud. I'd tell myself that over and over, until I almost believed it. There was a time when he couldn't leave home without kissing my forehead. Now, he'd pick up his keys, glance at his watch, and leave without a word. The roses we planted together had begun to wilt, and so had the warmth between us. One afternoon, I sat on the veranda, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. My friend Clara stopped by. She had known me since we were girls. She took one look at my face and sighed. "You've stopped laughing, haven't you?" she said softly. I smiled weakly, avoiding her eyes. "He's just busy, Clara. Things are different now." She took my hand, her voice gentle but firm. "Busy men still make time for what they love." Her words stayed with me long after she left. They echoed through the hallways of that villa, bouncing off the walls I had painted with love. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight spread across the empty side of the bed. It's strange how silence can whisper louder than words. I could almost hear the truth breathing beside me, patient, waiting. Over the next few days, the little things began to stand out. His laughter came less often. His phone never left his hand, and the warmth in his eyes, the one that used to melt every worry, had turned cold, unreadable. I tried to talk to him once. I asked if he was happy. He looked at me for a long moment, smiled faintly, and said, "Of course I am." But his eyes were already somewhere else, so I learned to pretend to. We shared dinners without conversation, smiles without meaning, love without life. And yet, I held on not to him, but to the hope that maybe one day he'd turn back and see me again. Then came that evening. We were sitting in the living room, the air heavy with unspoken words. His phone was on the table beside his cup of tea. It buzzed once. A name appeared on the screen, one I didn't recognize. My heart skipped, then stopped completely. In that single moment, everything around me blurred. The sound, the air, even my own heartbeat. That night, his phone buzzed with a name I didn't recognize, and my heart went still. Asterisk, there are moments in life when silence tells you the truth before words ever do. That night, I didn't go looking for pain. It found me anyway. After that name flashed on his screen, I tried to forget it. I told myself it was a client, a friend, anyone but what my heart already knew. But the mind is stubborn. It won't rest until it fits the pieces together. The next morning, he left early. I stood by the window and watched his car disappear down the hill. For the first time, I didn't wave. Something inside me whispered, "Find the truth." I walked to his study. The room still smelled like his cologne, familiar and distant at the same time. On the desk, beside the papers and coffee stains, lay his phone charger and a folded note. My hands trembled as I opened the drawer beneath it. Inside were small things that didn't belong to me: a delicate bracelet, a movie stub, a card with a name written in handwriting that wasn't mine. None of it was cruel. None of it screamed betrayal. But together, they whispered it. I sank into the chair, clutching those pieces of someone else's world. It wasn't anger that broke me. It was realizing how much I had loved. I thought of every morning I'd waited for his smile, every letter I'd written when he was away, every prayer I'd said for his safety. All of it, for a man who had already begun to walk away from me. In his heart, tears came, not as a storm, but as rain, quiet, endless, almost polite. I didn't curse him. I didn't scream. Maybe that's what love does when it's truly deep. It doesn't fight to destroy. It aches to understand. That evening, I lit a candle in the living room. Its light danced across our wedding photo. I looked at my younger self, the woman who had believed love could never falter, and whispered, "You'll survive this too." I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I chose silence, dignified, deliberate silence. I wanted the truth to unfold on its own, so that when it stood before me, it could no longer hide behind excuses. Days passed, and the silence between us grew thicker than walls. He seemed lighter, almost careless, as if his secret gave him freedom. He didn't notice that I'd already seen the map of his betrayal written all over his eyes. Then, one afternoon, as I was tending the garden, my phone rang. A man's voice came through, tired, steady, trembling. He said her name, the same name I'd seen that night. There was a long pause before either of us spoke again. Two strangers bound by the same wound. We didn't plan revenge. We didn't share anger. We shared truth, quiet, painful, human. That's when I called her husband, and we decided to tell the truth, together. Sometimes silence speaks louder than tears. That night, silence was all we had. The villa stood quiet, almost too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I arrived before sunset. The air smelled of rain and old roses, the same ones he once planted with me. Her husband was already there, sitting by the window, his hands clasped tightly together. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Our pain was fluent in silence. We lit a single lamp. The light was soft, trembling like a secret. Outside, the sky darkened slowly, swallowing the horizon. I could hear the wind brushing against the glass, and somewhere, a loose shutter kept tapping a heartbeat for the house that once held love. Time moved differently that evening. Every minute stretched thin, heavy, endless. We waited, two strangers bound not by love, but by the truth love had left behind. He looked at me once and said quietly, "Are you sure about this?" I nodded. We've lived with lies long enough. The rain began gentle at first, then steady, tapping against the windows like an anxious whisper. In the distance, headlights cut through the mist. A car slowed on the driveway. My breath caught. It was them, through the rain-blurred glass. I saw them step out laughing softly, sharing an umbrella. That laugh, the one I used to wait for every evening. I thought it would break me, but instead, it made me still, like the eye of a storm that has stopped fighting. We didn't rush. We didn't hide. We simply waited as the front door opened and footsteps echoed down the hall. When he saw me, his smile froze. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The umbrella slipped from his hand, and water dripped onto the floor, teeny ripples marking the moment. Everything changed. He looked at me as if seeing a ghost, the ghost of the woman who once trusted him. She stood behind him, her face pale, eyes wide. Her husband rose slowly from his chair. No one shouted, no one cursed. There was only the sound of rain and breathing. Truth didn't need words that night. It spoke through the air, thick and undeniable. He tried to speak, but his voice broke before the sentence began. And I didn't want explanations anymore. The time for answers had passed. I looked at him not with anger, but with the quiet sorrow of someone who finally understood the truth. You don't destroy love, I whispered. You just stop caring for it, until it dies on its own. No one moved for a long while. Rain pooled near the doorway, the lamp flickered, and in that dim golden light, 4 hearts stood bared to guilty, to wounded all forever changed. Her husband gently placed the bracelet, the one I had found on the table. It shone briefly before the lamp went out. That was the moment everything ended. Quietly, without screams, without violence. When I stepped outside, the rain touched my face. It felt cold, but it also felt clean. Thought sometimes endings don't come with noise. Sometimes they come with understanding. Morning always comes, even after the longest night. And when it does, you realize the sun was never gone. It was just waiting for you to open the curtains again. The days after that night felt unreal, quiet, heavy, yet strangely clear. I packed my things from the villa one morning, while the sun streamed through the windows. Every corner carried a memory. Laughter in the kitchen, promises on the balcony, the faint scent of roses that had long stopped blooming. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, not with sadness but with gratitude, because even if love had left those walls, it had taught me something precious before it did. When I finally closed the door behind me, I didn't feel like I was leaving a home. I felt like I was leaving a story that had already told me everything I needed to know. For a while, I lived quietly. I went back to the simple things: morning walks, my garden, a good book beside a window. People thought I must have been broken, but what they didn't understand was that healing isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about learning to live gently beside it. I didn't lose him that day. I found myself. For so long, I had been someone's wife, someone's comfort, someone's home, but now, I was finally becoming my own. Forgiveness didn't come quickly. It came in small steps, in every sunrise I watched without bitterness, in every cup of tea I made without trembling, in every quiet evening where I no longer waited for footsteps that would never return. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Holding on to anger felt like living with a ghost, and I had spent enough nights surrounded by them. Pain changes you, yes, but if you let it, it also cleanses you. It burns away the illusions, the dependencies, the pieces of yourself you gave away without noticing, and what's left behind is real. It's strength, it's clarity, it's freedom. I learned that love doesn't end when it's betrayed. It simply changes direction. It flows inward. It becomes the love you give yourself when the world forgets to. It becomes kindness, patience, resilience. It becomes the light you share with others when they think they can't make it through. So I started to live again. I grew new roses, the kind that bloom even after heavy rain. I began visiting my granddaughter more often, teaching her how to bake, how to laugh, how to trust herself before trusting anyone else. When she once asked me, "Grandma, do you still believe in love?" I smiled. "Yes, my dear," I said, "but now I believe in a love that begins within, the kind that no one can take away." And in that moment, I realized maybe life isn't about avoiding heartbreak. Maybe it's about becoming whole enough to survive it, and still love again. The villa may have seen my pain, but my heart carries my peace, and peace once found, never leaves. Time has a beautiful way of softening even the sharpest memories. The pain that once echoed in my heart has turned into something quieter, a kind of wisdom that only life can teach. Years have passed since that night. The villa still stands, tall and silent at the edge of the hill. Sometimes, when I drive past it, I stop for a moment, not to remember what was lost, but to honor what I found, because that house no longer holds my heartbreak. It holds my becoming. People often ask me how I survived it all, the betrayal, the silence, the letting go, and I tell them, you don't survive such things by forgetting them. You survive by growing around them, like a tree that bends in a storm but never stops reaching for the light. Now, when my granddaughter asks me about love, I tell her, never build your world around someone else's truth. Build it with your own, because love, my dear, should never ask you to lose yourself. Real love will never demand silence where your heart deserves peace. It will not dim your light, just to let someone else shine. And when love ends, it doesn't mean life does too. Sometimes, endings are the universe's way of gently guiding you back to yourself. I've learned that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness. It's the quiet strength of a soul that refuses to stay chained to the past. And peace. Peace is not found in revenge or regret. It's found in acceptance. In the moment you stop asking why me and start saying, thank you for showing me who I am. Every scar has its own story, and mine taught me this. Love is not about holding on. It's about learning when to open your hands and let life place something better inside them. And sometimes, that something better is simply yourself, wiser, gentler, whole. So when I sit by the window now, with my tea and my granddaughter's laughter filling the air, I look back at that younger woman I once was, fragile, hopeful, and brave, and I whisper to her, you made it, you found peace. That villa still stands, not as a memory of betrayal, but as proof that truth, no matter how painful, can set a heart free.